Hey guys, tonight we slip into the embroidered sandals of someone who, let's be honest, probably should have never agreed to take the job. You're not a gladiator, not a senator, not a general. No, you're the Roman emperor, the big fig, the guy who technically rules the known world but can't even pee in peace without someone whispering about succession. You're not dreaming when you hear footsteps echoing down the long marble hallways. The velvet drapes shift in a breeze that might just be paranoia. The heavy gold laurel wreath they made you wear yesterday left a dent in your scalp. Welcome to your life. Uncomfortable, over-scented, and absolutely drowning in expectations. Oh, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. Assassins, betrayals, angry senators, or that bad clam from last week's feast. Take your pick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and the time you're listening. I love seeing where these sleepy little journeys are being heard. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids flutter open to a dark, cool room that still smells faintly of cedar oil and burnt offerings. Not from last night. Your priests are very thorough. The flickering lamplight cuts long shadows across the mosaic floor. You're already late. Not for breakfast, for being seen. The emperor must always be visible, always radiating control, even if inside you feel like a toga-clad marshmallow being slowly roasted over the fires of civic expectation. There's a soft knock, not a polite one, just practiced. The kind of knock that says the empire can't wait for your skincare routine, your radiance. And so you rise. Your feet touch polished marble, but you don't feel it. Too many mornings like this one. There's no time to stretch, no lounging with grapes, no catching up on epic poetry. The Chamberlain venters with a scroll and a face tight enough to be used as a catapult sling. First item, a provincial governor in Gaul is asking for permission to build a statue in your likeness. Again. This one will have real ivory teeth, apparently. You're not flattered. You're tired. Because with every statue comes politics, who paid for it, who didn't, and who might think the whole thing's a coded insult. Second item, there's word from the east. The Parthians are acting shifty again. Or rather, more shifty than usual. Interpretations vary. Historians still argue whether the emperor actually controlled foreign policy, or if you were just rubber stamping whatever your generals and paranoid advisors tossed in front of you. Third item, one of your uncles wants a meeting. You know, the uncle who's definitely not plotting anything, but keeps importing unusually sharp letter openers from Alexandria. You sigh, deeply. It's the only form of protest you're allowed anymore. A slave enters carrying a basin of warmed rose water for your face. You let him do his job while mentally reviewing your day. Petitions, audiences, legal disputes, probably a sacrifice or two, and an awkward lunch with the Vestal virgins who never don't glare. And through it all, you must be gracious, serene, regal, the image of divine authority on earth. Meanwhile, you haven't pooped properly in 4 days. The doors swing open with theatrical grandeur, your signal to begin the slow, excruciating march through the Hall of Morning Murmurs. That's not the official name, of course, but it might as well be. Every step you take echoes off marble, and every echo is answered by whispers. Senators, courtiers, priests, generals, former friends, future murderers, and a few who manage to be all of the above before breakfast. They line up in neat rows, their faces painted with the kind of smiles only fear and ambition can buy.
As you walk past them, they bow just low enough to be respectful and just quick enough to not pull a muscle. Their words all blur together into a chorus of strategic compliments. Glorious as always, Imperator. Your wisdom shines brighter than Apollo's chariot. We simply must know where you got your sandals. Carthaginian? Your chamberlain floats beside you like a bureaucratic shadow, muttering names and functions under his breath. Senator Livius, requesting an audience about land disputes in Hispania. Prefect Gallus, needing approval for grain shipments. Lady Messalina, offering you a new breed of racing peacock. You nod vaguely, as though the wheels of empire aren't creaking under their own nonsense. Deep down, you wish you were one of those racing peacocks. Beautiful, semi-useless, and pampered until death by overfeeding or poorly timed festivals. There's a pause at the end of the hallway. One of the bronze doors has been scratched, a small thing. A servant tries to buff it out before you notice. You notice. You always do. In this palace, even a smudge might be a message. Historians still argue whether empires were truly the most powerful men in the world or just the most visible puppets in a puppet show staged by rich families with better daggers and sneakier nephews. You're beginning to believe the latter. A senator breaks formation. He steps forward too eagerly, toga flapping like a frantic bird, and thrusts forward a scroll with trembling hands. You recognize him. Senator Crassus. He's the kind who weeps easily in public, which always makes you deeply suspicious. His breath smells faintly of honey and fear. He says, Imperator, I come not for myself, but for the people of Apulia. They are drowning in taxes, quite literally, after the aqueduct collapsed and flooded the records office. You pause, not because of the plea, because of the aqueduct. You remember approving that project. You remember the architect being very proud of the decorative dolphin statues. You say, tell Apulia that if they can survive a flood of parchment, they can survive anything. Your tone is light. Your meaning is not. He laughs too hard, too long. You walk on past velvet-draped columns and ivory inlays, through a parade of court sycophants whose eyes follow your every blink, every twitch. One wrong glance and a noble family might assume you're favoring their rivals. One wrong tone and a military cohort might go full mutiny in Dalmatia. One guy once interpreted your sneeze as divine judgment. He stabbed himself in the leg as penance. You still get birthday figs from his widow. And here's the best part. You haven't even reached the breakfast chamber yet. At last, the breakfast chamber, which in theory should be a haven, a moment of calm, of dates and honey cakes, of hot bread and cool melon. But you're not exactly living in theory, are you? You're living in Rome, where even breakfast is a political minefield wrapped in a grape leaf. The chamber smells of cinnamon and vinegar-polished silver. Sunshine filters through sheer linen drapes, golden and hazy, softening the edges of a room that's about to slap you awake with news from the frontier. You ease onto your carved chair, cedarwood inlaid with ivory, uncomfortable in a way only truly expensive things manage to be. Before you can reach for a fig, a parchment lands beside your plate. A courier bows so low his face almost collides with the olives. You give him a single nod, the Roman version of, "Fine, go away before I decree you into a duck." Your steward, bless him, tries to pretend you can enjoy the meal in peace. He unfolds a napkin as if that will distract you from the bold red wax seal screaming, "Urgent military dispatch." You tear it open. Apparently, a cohort in Britannia lost half its gear during a surprise bog encounter. Surprise,
being the key word. You envision armored men slowly sinking into the swamp, muttering in Latin as their sandals vanish under the mud. The report is extremely detailed about the lost standards, slightly less concerned about the 20 soldiers who may or may not still be bubbling somewhere near Hadrian's Wall. You nibble a date, mostly to prove you're not bothered. It's hard to look divine while chewing, though, especially when your front teeth are slightly crooked, something your marble busts always conveniently forget. Across from you, the secretary begins the daily summary. Bandits in Numidia, grain shortage in Sicily. A minor governor tried to declare himself son of the sun before being quickly de-sunned. You grunt once. That's emperor speak for add it to the list of things I'm going to pretend to think about later. The fruit tray shifts toward you, carried by a nervous attendant who may or may not have been crying earlier. You're not sure if it's fear or allergies, and honestly, you're not sure which would be worse. You stab a slice of apple. Crisp, tart, possibly your only victory this morning. Your Grace, someone murmurs beside you, shall we discuss the matter of the Egyptian envoy? Ah, yes, him. The one who arrived with a pet leopard and claimed to have a scroll written by Isis herself. You remember now. He also asked to borrow the imperial astrologer for private consultations. And by borrow, he meant marry. You sigh. That's your second side today. You're already off schedule. As always, historians still debate whether emperors ever had time to think for themselves, or if they were merely expensive figureheads, weighed down by ceremonial spoons and imperial nonsense. But you know the truth. The empire never rests, and neither do you. Even your digestive system is on a strict protocol to avoid scandalous bathroom incidents mid-briefing. Your hand hovers over a pomegranate segment. You lower it. No time. You rise, nod once more to the food you never finished, and prepare to face the next absurd, perfumed lair of your utterly inescapable power.
The wardrobe chamber, or as you're starting to call it in your head, the room of potential death by fabric. You'd think dressing for the day would be the easy part. Put on some toga, toss a laurel wreath on your head, maybe choose a nice belt. But no, this is Rome, and you're emperor. That means each garment has political undertones, family rivalries, and sometimes literal curses stitched into the seams. The moment you step inside, 3 attendants descend like elegant vultures. One carries the tunic, one has your senatorial toga, the third holds a tray of rings, because nothing says good morning like debating which gemstone won't cause a diplomatic incident. Togas aren't just cloth, they're math. Heavy, pleated equations in wool. If you wrap it wrong, you'll look like a provincial mayor on festival day. Wrap it too perfectly, and the Senate will think you're trying too hard. Remember that one guy who went minimalist? He disappeared after claiming only demigods should wear pure white. Bold strategy. Short-lived. One of the younger dressers hesitates before handing you your fibula, the brooch that fastens everything together, and conveniently could also be used to stab someone in a cloakroom dispute. It's shaped like a thunderbolt, because of course it is. Everyone wants the gods on their side, even while accessorizing. Today's laurel wreath has been chilled with rose water. It's supposed to clarify your thoughts. Mostly it gives you a wet forehead. It's heavier than it looks too. Pure gold, thanks to the last artisan who thought olive branches were a bit provincial. You wore his creation once, you were mocked for a week, you never saw him again. The ring tray is another nightmare. Each finger you fill says something. The amethyst, too mystical. Last emperor who wore it was into orgies and ritual humming. The black onyx, very popular among generals with succession ambitions. You end up choosing a blue glass one. Decorative, harmless, meaningless. Just how you like your jewelry and your political enemies, come to think of it. But here's a fun little detail. Some emperors kept specific rings for hex deflection. Caligula reportedly had a talisman carved from a meteorite to confuse Jupiter. It didn't help. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were genuine beliefs or clever distractions. Either way, nobody wants to be the emperor who laughed off protective charms and then mysteriously slipped on his own bathwater. You glance in the polished bronze mirror. The final effect? Imperial, mildly intimidating, and just puffy-eyed enough to suggest you've been working through the night, instead of crying over that letter from your cousin in exile. A courtier enters with a silk scroll, your schedule, color-coded by urgency and risk of assassination. Today's events include a Senate address, a diplomatic luncheon, and, oh look, a public sacrifice involving 12 goats and one extremely nervous-looking augur. You adjust your toga's fold and breathe in. The wool itches, the wreath slides, your back hurts, but you are Rome's apex predator, dressed like a fancy burrito with trust issues. Time to face the herd.
The Senate chamber smells like ambition and mildew. Columns rise like judgmental fingers, and the dome above traps every whispered insult and theatrical sigh in a perfect echo chamber of passive-aggressive grandeur. You enter through the central doors, flanked by guards whose job is to look imposing while secretly daydreaming about olives and early retirement. Everyone rises. It's not really reverence, it's reflex. Like when a cat jumps at a loud noise. They bow, you nod. The political mating dance begins. You glide down the main aisle in your woolen imperial glory, toga tugging at your knees like a needy toddler. Eyes track your every blink. A senator in the front row is already sweaty, which could mean he's plotting your death or just wearing too many layers. With Roman politics, it's often both. Your throne, your chair of state, awaits you on the dais. It's rigid, adorned with eagles and lions, and ergonomically designed to encourage prompt decision-making through discomfort. You settle in. The room adjusts. Someone coughs. Another clears his throat. It's like being in a play where everyone's forgotten their lines but insists on performing anyway. The consul rises first, always with a most noble and divine emperor, and a voice so syrupy it could glaze a honey cake. He launches into a petition about trade tariffs with Crete. Again. You nod like you care, but inside, you're imagining what it would be like to just walk out, swim to Cyprus, open a quiet inn. No toga required. Now comes the delicate part, responding. If you seem too decisive, you're a tyrant. Too mild, you're weak. A good response is like a tossed olive pit, casual but with deadly accuracy. So you deliver your reply with the studied ease of a man who has survived at least 4 poison plots and 1 prophetic dream involving bees. You make a compelling point, you say, but let us remember Crete also makes compelling wine, which may be clouding some judgments. Mild chuckles, one senator chokes on his own laugh, another glares, and just like that, the power dynamics have shifted a fraction.
Historians still argue whether the emperor truly ruled the Senate or if the Senate ruled the emperor with rituals and slow, suffocating bureaucracy. You know the answer. It's a yes to both. The Senate's like a snake. You can charm it, cage it, maybe even tame it, but you sleep better knowing your sandals are snake-proof. Now comes Senator Petronius, always a wild card. Too clever, too young, and alarmingly good at remembering minor imperial contradictions. He launches into a speech about restructuring civic granaries for long-term fiscal health. You stop listening halfway through. You've learned to spot when a monologue is more about ego than policy. Still, you pretend to listen. You lean forward just slightly, the way Augustus used to do in busts. They notice. They always notice. By the time you rise to leave, your legs are numb, and your brain is staging a quiet rebellion. The session ends in formal applause, which sounds like rain on marble and means absolutely nothing. You nod one last time, then pivot out, face serene, heart pounding, already thinking of which senator's wine cellar you'd like quietly seized tomorrow, just for fun.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any more exhausting than surviving the Senate without launching a decorative amphora at someone's face, welcome to imperial justice. Or, as you've come to think of it, amateur theater with legal consequences. You're escorted to the Hall of Judgments, a less glamorous wing of the palace where the smell of sandalwood battles valiantly against sweat, desperation, and the occasional whiff of burnt incense from a hopeful mother-in-law's last-ditch bribe. You take your seat, yet another carved monstrosity designed more for intimidation than lumbar support, and nod for the first case to begin. The crowd parts like bread dough in a too-warm oven, and out steps a trembling merchant with a wildly exaggerated bow. He's accused his neighbor of poisoning his figs with a cursed amulet shaped like a goat's butt. Yes, you heard that right. Goat's butt. A few members of your advisory bench snicker quietly. You don't. You can't. You're the divine face of Roman law. You must remain composed, even while wondering how many fig disputes a supposedly omnipotent ruler should have to hear before breakfast digestion is even finished. The merchant's neighbor arrives next, dragging a goat as a character witness. No joke. The goat is wearing a garland of garlic and staring straight into your soul. You've learned, painfully, that no case is too ridiculous. Once you had to rule on whether a stolen wig qualified as grand larceny because it was allegedly blessed by Apollo. You ruled in favor of Apollo. He gets very sensitive. The guards present the evidence, which today includes 1 questionable amulet, 2 dried figs, and a scroll written entirely in badly scrawled hexes. Honestly, it looks like a kid's attempt at poetry mixed with a recipe for foot rot. One of your legal advisors leans in and murmurs, "Sire, the augurs say the moon was in Scorpio when the figs were harvested. This may influence guilt." You make a non-committal noise, somewhere between a sigh and a sneeze. Here's the real problem. Justice isn't about justice. It's about optics. Mercy makes you look weak. Harshness fuels rumors that you're channeling Nero. You settle on a middle path. Find the fig-cursing neighbor, send the merchant to a temple for spiritual cleansing, and confiscate the goat. You'll probably give it to the Vestal Virgins later. They've been asking for a new pet. Case 2. A noblewoman has accused her cousin of using a mirror polished with cursed oil to make her hair fall out. You manage to keep a straight face. Barely.
Historians still argue whether emperors wielded true legal control or were simply forced into endless performances of judicial theater to appease the public and distract from actual governing. After today's docket, you lean heavily toward performance, preferably a short one with a single curtain call. Somewhere between a man claiming divine possession by Mercury and a baker who insists Jupiter told him to start charging double for bread, you begin to feel your right eyelid twitch. Classic sign of imperial fatigue. You rule on 5 more cases. You sentence 2, you pardon 1, and in a fit of generosity, or sleep deprivation, you assign a philosopher to tutor the fig merchant in the basics of critical thinking. Justice served. Goat relocated. You rise slowly, robes dragging, pretending not to hear the crowd's scattered applause. You're not even halfway through the day, and already, divine judgment feels like divine punishment.
You know you're really in trouble when the secret passage is the most relaxing part of your day. The guards clear the courtroom. The nobles disperse in a rustle of silk and barely concealed side-eye. You give a single flick of your fingers, an old signal, subtle but sharp, and slip into the shadows behind the eastern colonnade. A narrow, torchlit hallway opens up like a throat swallowing you whole. No marble, no incense, just stone, damp air, and the distinct smell of secrets. This isn't on any map. Only a handful of people know it exists. One of them was your cousin. He's dead now. Fell downstairs, they said. Very tragic. And yet, somehow, you don't remember stairs being involved. The corridor twists through the bowels of the palace, past carved niches that once held idols and now just gathered dust and anxiety. You run your hand along the wall. There's a notch. There it is. You press it. A small panel slides open. Inside, the Chamber of Quiet Reports. It's not large, just one circular room lined with scroll niches and heavy velvet curtains. There's a table in the center where intelligence is laid out like a buffet of doom. You sit. No throne here, just a wooden stool with bite marks, possibly human, possibly not. Your spy master is already waiting. He blends into the gloom like he's part fungus. His voice is dry, slow, and coated with what sounds suspiciously like sarcasm. Morning, Caesar. You've got 3 whispers and a full rumor today. Congratulations. He hands you the first scroll, scribbled in cipher, of course. Standard practice ever since some clever poet smuggled rebellion verses into a shipment of love letters. You squint at the papyrus. Possible plot in Alexandria, involving 2 scribes, a camel merchant, and an amateur actor named Euphemus. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, your spymaster says. Apparently he's been portraying you in tavern skits. Badly. You place that scroll in the pile. Next up is your general in Germania has been spotted consulting a druid. That's bad. That's very bad. Druids are terrifying. They don't even write things down, which means nobody knows what they're up to until someone wakes up covered in blood and oak leaves. Your spymaster scratches his ear. It could be nothing. Could be a blood pact under a full moon. Hard to tell. Historians still argue whether emperors genuinely controlled their intelligence networks or whether they were simply fed pre-chewed truths by whichever advisor could lie the smoothest. You found that most spies are loyal until their rent's due. There's also an anonymous note left at the Temple of Vesta. You unfold it. It reads, "When the moon turns, the laurel will rot." Poetic, vague, useless. You toss it into the fire urn, which crackles like it knows too much. A pause settles in the room. The spymaster eyes you sideways.
Should I also mention the rumor about your physician? I sigh. That's sign number 3 today. Let me guess. He's been slipping love potions into my mulled wine. No, he replies. He's been selling strands of your hair as protective talismans. Of course he has. You rise, dusting your palms against the hem of your toga. The walls feel closer now, the empire heavier. The curtain rustles behind you. Just a draft, you tell yourself. Time to return to the light. Or at least, the part of the palace pretending to be it.
You emerge from the passageway blinking like a mole, though in your case, the mole has a laurel wreath and a complex relationship with sanitation funding. You're back in the West Wing now, near the Hall of Marble Maps. This is the imperial stage for public works discussions, civic planning, and the occasional surprise complaint from an angry merchant who thinks his shop's roof leaks because of divine punishment. Today's agenda: aqueduct maintenance, bridge inspections, and a new public latrine that's turning into a minor religious dispute. You walk in to find the city planner already mid-rant, gesturing wildly over a marble model of the forum. Tiny ivory citizens stand frozen forever in the act of shopping, arguing, or being robbed. The engineer, Flavius something or other, is red in the face, explaining that the aqueduct from Tiber is weeping at the joints. You'd weep too if your joints had been patched by the lowest bidder. A map is unrolled. It's huge, detailed, and crawling with tiny wax markers. Every road, bathhouse, temple, and public urinal in Rome is represented. A stray fig leaf from your breakfast has somehow made its way to Hispania. You discreetly flick it off. Your job here is simple: nod, ask sharp questions, approve funding, and try to look like the kind of man who understands structural load-bearing ratios. You do not, but you fake it well, which is basically the whole imperial gig. Why, you ask calmly, does the new amphitheater in Ostia still not have shade awnings? Budget constraints, Flavius says, eyes darting like a trapped squirrel's. You raise an eyebrow. And also a minor fire, he adds quickly. You nod. Fix it. I'm not having senators complain about sunburn again. We're not barbarians. Somewhere between updates on collapsed masonry and pigeon infestations at the Capitolium, a junior clerk timidly mentions that the new statue of you in the marketplace looks a bit cross-eyed. You blink. How cross-eyed? Accidentally humorous, sire. You make a note to have it rotated to face a wall. Problem solved. Public works are never glamorous, but they're essential. Your face is on every milestone, your name carved into bridges and walls. You're the eternal builder, the great improver, the guy who gets blamed when the fountain starts spitting frogs instead of water. And then there's the latrine issue. Ah, yes. The Temple of Ceres is upset because the new public restroom shares a wall with their sanctuary. Apparently, the sacred aura is being compromised. There's debate as to whether that's spiritual pollution or just an olfactory one. You offer a compromise. Install a mural of Ceres inside the latrine for blessings. Problem solved. Again. Historians still argue whether emperors truly cared about civic development or simply used it to distract the masses with fountains and shiny marble. You'd argue it's both. Rome runs on roads and applause, and if those roads flood or crack or trap a senator in mud for 6 hours, you'll hear about it before the sun sets. You sign a few scrolls, approve a couple of grain shipments, assign someone named Marcus, they're all named Marcus, to oversee new drainage near the baths. Then you stand, shoulders back, chin high, the emperor who builds. Meanwhile, a pigeon lands directly on the statue model of you and poops on its head. Perfect.
If bureaucracy had a smell, it would be this room. Old parchment, warmed ink, and that faint acidic tinge of someone's stress-induced sweat. You're in the imperial scriptorium now, also known as the place where joy goes to die. Scrolls are stacked like pastry towers, except none of them are delicious, and most of them might be legal time bombs. Each one requires your seal, not a metaphorical seal of approval, an actual wax-stamped, gold-embossed, owl-carved, signet-pressed imperial seal that must be applied just right or the Senate will get twitchy. You sit. A scribe adjusts your cushion with the delicacy of someone handling a nest of angry snakes. Another clears his throat. This first decree, he says, formally approves the appointment of Sextus Flaccus as overseer of aqueduct shadows. You pause. Aqueduct shadows? Yes, sire. A new concern for timing of shade cast on market stalls. You stare at him for 3 whole seconds. He doesn't blink. You sign. The next scroll, a tax exemption request from a cult that worships you as the living embodiment of the north wind. The name of the cult? The Breezians. You briefly consider approving them out of sheer pity, but then you remember what happened the last time a cult started a fire to release your divine warmth. Goodbye granary. You toss that scroll in the revisit never pile. The real danger of decree fatigue isn't boredom, it's the blur. If you sign too fast, you might accidentally grant an obscure fishing village the right to mint their own currency. Or, as nearly happened last week, grant full Roman citizenship to a goat named Crispus who was very convincing in his petition. Historians still argue whether emperors read every document or just pretended while letting staff handle the real decisions. You do read them, mostly, kind of. Okay, sometimes you just skim for words like war, death, inheritance, and wine cellar disputes. Halfway through, you prick your finger on a reed pen. It's your 4th paper cut this week. The gods might be trying to tell you something, or maybe it's just that your scribes sharpen their pens like they're preparing for a duel. You try to focus. A scroll with a red ribbon catches your eye. Urgent. It's a trade dispute in Crete. Something about mislabeling spiced honey and whether cinnamon can be taxed separately from saffron. You blink rapidly. Somewhere in this nonsense, you might be accidentally declaring war on Crete. Again. Make a note, you mutter. No declarations of war after noon. A junior notary writes that down like it's divine wisdom. Another scroll. This one about renaming a minor road after your favorite racing charioteer. You hesitate. He did win that race with a dislocated shoulder and a mildly drunk horse. You approve it. The people love a hero. And you love not being assassinated over chariot politics. It's a real thing. Don't ask. The final scroll? A congratulatory decree for a senator's daughter's wedding. You don't know her. You don't care, but you sign it. Then pause. Add a PS. May the marriage last longer than most. The scribe grins. Do you want that in Latin or sarcasm, sire? You wave him off. Time to stand. Your hand aches. Your seal ring is hot. Somewhere a goat has probably become mayor due to a paperwork error. You are Rome's lawgiver, ruler of the civilized world, and you just spent 2 hours arguing over aqueduct shade. You step outside into the blinding Roman sun, like a prisoner emerging from a scroll dungeon. Which, to be fair, you basically are. But there's no rest for the Empire's golden goose. Your next stop is the heart of every illusion that keeps Rome from collapsing under its own marble weight, the midday inspection of the public entertainments. Bread and circuses, they call it. Except today it's more like mildly stale grain rations and ostriches that don't want to play nice. You ride in a gilded litter, carried by 4 very muscular, very sweaty men who've mastered the art of looking stoic while also quietly resenting every ounce of your existence. As the canopy flutters above you, crowds cheer. Well, some cheer. Others jeer under their breath, or offer the tight-lipped, please don't tax me more smile. A boy throws petals. A girl throws what might be a fig pit. Both miss. You arrive at the Colosseum, still reeking of last week's lion incident. They're airing it out with bundles of myrrh and prayers. The smell now? Less death, more sacrificial potpourri. The gladiators are lined up for inspection, broad-chested, shiny, exhausted. One has a black eye the size of a goose egg and still manages to wink at you. You nod back. Respect. Your master of games leans in, whispering updates. Today's schedule includes 3 duels, a comedic interlude involving a dwarf dressed as Julius Caesar, and the grand finale, a theatrical naval skirmish staged with ox-hide boats in a shallow basin. It is, predictably, a disaster waiting to happen. Oh, and, the master adds, there was an ostrich incident. You groan. Of course. Turns out the emperor's favorite bird, a massive creature named Jupiter with a violent streak and a fashionably dyed plume, escaped during rehearsals. It charged a senator's wife. She's fine. Her hat, however, did not survive. You sigh, your 4th today, and gesture for the opening procession to begin. Trumpets blare, the crowd roars. You wave like you mean it. It's important the people see you enjoying the games, even if you're mentally calculating how many coins you'll need to mint to cover next month's grain subsidy. Because here's the thing, if they're cheering, they're not revolting. If they're clapping, they're not stabbing. And if they're watching a half-dressed actor in a papier-mâché lion suit perform a dramatic reenactment of Romulus and Remus, they're not asking where the empire's taxes went. Historians still argue whether the emperor truly enjoyed these public performances or simply endured them as part of the never-ending PR campaign that was Roman leadership. You've discovered the answer lies somewhere between mildly amused and how many more of these before I get to eat? You glance to your left. There's a vendor selling honey-roasted chickpeas shaped like amphorae. You make a mental note to have him promoted. The empire runs on 3 things: roads, spectacle, and novelty snacks. As the mock naval battle begins and one actor immediately falls overboard into 2 feet of water, you allow yourself a moment of tired amusement. The crowd laughs. The sun glints off your laurel. Someone chants your name. You wave, again. You're not entertained. But they are. And that, for now, is enough.
The sun has just started its lazy descent over the rooftops of Rome, casting long golden beams that make everything look much more peaceful than it actually is. But you're not fooled. You know what time it is. Lunchtime. With your wife. Empress Flavia sits like a statue carved from ambition and scented oils, regal, radiant, and slightly terrifying in a don't drink anything she pours you kind of way. You love her. You respect her. You also double-check which cup is yours. The dining room is a private one, by imperial standards anyway. Just you, Flavia, 3 silent slaves serving food, and an extremely awkward poet in the corner, plucking a lyre for mood. The lyre is out of tune. You don't comment.
He looks like he's one misstep away from being fed to the swans. You begin with boiled eggs in garum. You never liked garum. Nobody likes garum. But it's expected. The Empress delicately dips a fig into honey and raises a brow. "So," she says, slicing the tension like a senator slicing votes, "I hear the statue in the Forum is being redone. Again." You nod cautiously. "They say it captured too much of my left eye." She chews, slowly. "And nothing to do with the fact that it also made your nose look slightly Julian." You pause. That's a deep cut. The Julians were the last dynasty. Their noses were, how do we say this gently, commanding. Your nose, blessedly, is more philosopher king than eagle in freefall. You sip your watered wine, carefully. This is how most imperial lunches go, a soft duel of daggers wrapped in compliments. Because in Rome, even marriage is a political alliance, one that comes with dowries, dynastic expectations, and at least 3 astrologers offering unsolicited intimacy advice. Today's main course is cold pheasant with spiced plums. Flavia eats slowly, like she's waiting for you to say something foolish. You oblige. "I'm thinking of reassigning General Corvinus to the eastern frontier." She doesn't blink. "Ah, the general who gave you that golden dagger last Saturnalia." You nod. She sets down her fork. "Curious, since her sister just pledged support to your cousin Tiberius." There it is. You've walked into the trap with both sandals on. Historians still argue whether empresses held significant power or simply influenced things through whisper and dinner table diplomacy. You don't argue. You just survive. If power is a game, Flavia is a champion-level player with 3 backup strategies and a poison tester who's never wrong. She leans in slightly. "You've looked tired lately. Long mornings. Or perhaps you've been seeing that fortune teller again." You don't answer. She doesn't push. Instead, she changes the subject with a smile so smooth it should be carved into marble. "Oh, by the way, the Vestal Virgins sent another dove. They want an imperial visit, preferably one where you don't insult the sacred flame again." "It was a metaphor," you mutter. "It was a disaster," she counters, daintily spearing a plum. The lyre twangs painfully. You rise, brushing breadcrumbs from your lap, and press a kiss to her cheek. She smiles like a queen who's won this round. You leave the room, already wondering what she really meant by, "You've looked tired." Probably nothing, but possibly everything.
You make your way through the palace's western wing, down the long portico lined with gods you half believe in on your good days. It's temple time, a delicate fusion of religious devotion, crowd-pleasing performance, and high-stakes political theater with just enough incense to trigger your sinuses. The air grows thick with myrrh and crushed laurels as you approach the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, your designated spiritual pit stop for the afternoon. The steps are swept, the banners are crisp, and the priests are already sweating through their ceremonial tunics, which for them is business as usual. For you, it's a careful dance across a spiritual tightrope. A trumpet sounds as you ascend, though the guy playing it appears to be struggling with a mild head cold. The result is less divine majesty and more dying goose in bronze. You pretend not to notice. Today's ritual, a blessing for continued imperial favor, health, and politely unspoken but heavily implied, not dying in your sleep from either stress or stabbing.
The high priest greets you with a bow so deep you're concerned he'll dislocate something. He leads you to the altar, where a spotless white bull awaits your inspection. It's already twitching. You don't blame it. The ritual proceeds with chanting, sprinkling of wine, and the very formal waving of sacred herbs. You raise your hands, mutter the expected Latin phrases, and hope no one notices you nearly mispronounce pietas as pietris, which, depending on dialect, may imply divine obligation or a fish sauce recipe. The bull is sacrificed offstage because you requested less screaming this time. You still hear it, faintly, but it's muffled. Improvement. Afterwards, you're handed a scroll bearing a divine message, supposedly interpreted from the bull's liver. Apparently, the gods are pleased but cautious, which is exactly what they said last week and the week before. You're beginning to suspect the gods are just commitment phobic. Then comes the important bit, the public moment. You stand on the temple steps, backlit by columns, surrounded by marble perfection, and raise your arms to the cheering crowd below. You say something about divine unity. You thank Jupiter. You praise Rome. You even throw in a line about civic harmony. It all sounds terribly noble, even if you're thinking mostly about your aching feet. There's a superstition floating around that emperors who skip too many temple visits tend to die mysteriously. The kind of mysterious that includes unfortunate choking accidents, sudden falls off a balcony, or slipping on a sacred eel during a purification ritual. Yes, that happened. No, the eel did not survive. Historians still argue whether emperors believed in the gods or just played along for the votes. You believe in something, but whether that's divine order or just very consistent priestly bookkeeping, you haven't quite decided. As you descend the steps, a child runs up to you with a flower. The guards move fast, but you wave them off. The child hands you the bloom and says, "Don't die today." You manage a smile. You say, "Working on it."
You're back in your litter now, the thin silk curtains filtering sunlight into a gentle golden haze. But even behind the gauzy barrier of imperial luxury, you can smell it, the city's underbelly. Garum, unwashed tunics, wet stone, stale bread, human sweat, and something faintly fungal. Rome may be the heart of civilization, but this afternoon it smells like the armpit of Jupiter himself. You're headed through the Subura, the crowded, cacophonous district that pulses with the life of the plebs, the common folk, the ones who chant your name during festivals and then curse it at dinner when the grain rations arrive spoiled or short. You rarely visit this part of town, which is exactly why you're visiting now. Optics, after all. Nothing says divinely in touch with the people like stepping over a vomit puddle near a public bathhouse. The litter slows. Your guards part the crowd with just enough force to seem protective, not aggressive. You step out onto cobbled streets that have seen more sandals than temple floors. Children gawk. Vendors pause mid-haggle. Someone drops a cabbage. You're flanked by advisors and scribes pretending this is all very normal. A civic visit, a benevolent ruler checking in on his people, which is mostly true, though part of you is also curious, when was the last time someone told you the truth about how things smell outside the Senate? You tour a newly rebuilt tenement funded by imperial coin after the last fire took out half a block. The residents line up. They bow. They smile nervously. You know that smile. It's the same one you wear when sitting through a prophecy you don't believe.
An old woman seizes your hand. Her grip is surprisingly strong. "My son died in Germania," she says, voice cracking. "You said he'd be remembered. Is he?" You freeze. Not because you didn't expect grief, but because you did, and still don't know how to answer it. "Yes," you say softly. "He is." She nods once, satisfied, or at least done. You move on, ducking under low archways and sidestepping puddles of God's knows what. The street musicians strike up a quick tune. Too quick, probably, hoping for a coin. You toss one. They smile wider. One starts improvising a song about your generosity. It rhymes imperator with bread hoarder. Close enough. At a makeshift clinic, a medicus shows you rows of patients suffering from what he diplomatically calls summer afflictions. Translation: sores, stomach curses, and maybe a rat-born mystery or two. You hold your breath, not out of disgust, but out of survival instinct. You've already had 2 emperors in your family line die from civic goodwill. And yet it's here, in the clamor, the stink, the unfiltered humanity, that something almost like clarity arrives. You're not just ruling marble statues and gold-trimmed scrolls. You're ruling this. People with cracked sandals, bad teeth, and wild dreams. Historians still argue whether emperors truly understood the plight of the lower classes, or if occasional walkabouts were just for show. You'd argue this isn't a show. This is the only part that feels real. You wave, you nod, you promise a baker he'll get fresh grain next week, though honestly, you're not sure if the shipment from Carthage survived the storm. Then you step back into your litter. You smell like smoke, garlic, and goat, but the cheers are genuine. And for a moment, so are you.
You barely have time to scrub the scent of boiled cabbage from your imperial robes before a messenger appears, breathless and clutching a sealed dispatch. The wax still feels warm, straight from the edge of the world. Germania, maybe, or Dacia. Some cold, forested place where everyone's beard is too long and your name is whispered like a distant thunderclap. Half respect, half boogeyman. You retreat into your private study, that small miracle of quiet within the palace, where the walls are lined with scrolls, maps, and statues that judge you silently. You break the seal. The wax cracks like a warning. The letter is from General Maximus, no relation to the famous one. This Maximus is a loyal soldier, or was. It's hard to tell anymore. Every dispatch now reads like a riddle wrapped in flattery, smothered in red ink and urgent qualifiers. Hail, Imperator, divine pillar of Rome, luminous as Apollo's brow. Yes, get to the point. You scan past the buttered-up metaphors to the real message. Supply shortages. Morale is low. The men are cold. There are rumors of an uprising among the auxiliaries. And worse, he's requesting permission to conduct negotiations with a local chieftain. You know what that means. Bribes. Or worse, honors. And once you hand out one honor to a barbarian, 10 others show up with axes and emotional demands. You clench the scroll. Another note from another far-flung battlefield. All written in that coded general speak, where favorable outcome possible might mean we're on fire, please send socks. Your military secretary enters, clutching another scroll. Dispatch from Mauritania, sire. Their coastal fort was attacked again. Pirates. Still, you mutter? Didn't we hang someone for that last month? Apparently, new pirates. Of course. The empire is too big. You know it. Everyone knows it.
You rule from a marble desk in Rome while legions freeze or bleed on muddy banks thousands of miles away. You're expected to care deeply and strategically about every ambush, every arrow, every squabble over fishing rights between angry legionaries and goat herders. Historians still argue whether emperors truly commanded the armies or simply rubber-stamped the decisions of whichever general flattered them best that season. You've read the debate. Sometimes you want to scribble in the margins, yes, but also, I'm tired. You consider your options. Reassign Maximus? Deny negotiations. Approve limited bribery and quietly hope it doesn't turn into a public scandal involving wine, mistresses, and a stolen eagle standard? You send a message back. Hold position. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Maintain discipline. Reinforcements pending. It means nothing and everything. It's imperial code for, do what you must, but if it fails, it's not my fault. Your fingers ache as you seal it. You've written 100 such replies. Each one another stone laid on top of the mountain of maintenance that is being emperor. You look to the map on the wall. Tiny pins mark your territories like jeweled freckles. It's beautiful, impressive, and completely unmanageable. From somewhere outside, a trumpet sounds. The afternoon's religious procession, no doubt. You lean back in your chair, the letter from Maximus curling in your lap like a dead leaf. Another province threatens to unravel, and all you've got left is wax, words, and that gnawing little whisper that maybe, just maybe, you've already lost it all.
Back at the palace, you try to find solace in your private quarters, but tranquility is a myth here, like honest senators or quiet chariot wheels. Even your bathwater talks behind your back. Not literally, but metaphorically, absolutely. The inner chambers are dimly lit, perfumed, and, most importantly, guarded. But privacy, as an emperor, is like sleep, technically possible, theoretically encouraged, and practically extinct. You're seated on a low, cushioned bench while an attendant pours warm rose-scented water over your arms. It's soothing, until your personal secretary enters, apologizing profusely while holding a scroll like it's about to explode. A dispute, sire, between Senator Plotus and his cousin, land inheritance in Sicilia. They both claim the will. Of course they do. Romans treat wills like battle plans. You sigh, then gesture for the secretary to continue. He does, rapidly, explaining that both parties have arrived at the palace, each with witnesses, astrologers, and, somehow, a minor poet who claims the deceased appeared to him in a dream, demanding justice. Put them in the green chamber, you mutter, barely concealing your exasperation. Let the poet wait outside, with the goats. Yes, sire. He bows and backs out, just as your cupbearer enters, bearing a goblet of diluted Falernian wine. It's tepid. You drink anyway. That's when you notice something odd. Your bath attendant, a quiet young man from Thessaly who rarely speaks, hesitates while drying your left hand. It's subtle, but you're trained to spot these things. Odd pauses, darting eyes, hands that shake a little too much near your neck. Later, you'll have your spy master ask some questions. Gently, of course. But now you let it pass. Nothing ruins an afternoon like an accidental throat cutting in your own bath. And besides, he's new. Maybe it's just nerves. Or maybe he's plotting to smother you with your towel later. Either way, nothing says self-care like strategic paranoia. Historians still argue whether emperors were truly surrounded by spies and traitors, or if the fear itself was a side effect of too much power and too little sleep. You lean toward the theory that says both. After your bath,
You dress lightly, a simple tunic and sandals, a rare moment of softness fabric-wise. You sit near the window, hoping for a breeze and receiving only the distant sound of arguing senators echoing from somewhere down the hall. That's when a slave approaches with a tray bearing a sealed letter. No insignia, just your name written with an unfamiliar hand. You open it slowly. Inside, a short note. When the moon turns full and the lion sleeps, the olive tree will bleed. Classic, cryptic, likely nonsense. You pass it to your chief of correspondence without a word. He doesn't flinch, just adds it to a stack of similar oddities, cursed poems, veiled threats, and dramatic metaphors delivered via pigeon, child, or street performer. You're tired, not from the weight of ruling, but from the endless stream of people who want things, from your lands, your influence, your ear, your downfall, and they all pretend it's love. As you rise to face the next crisis, the poet outside is now allegedly weeping in hexameter. You realize something unsettling. Even in the one place meant for stillness, there's no silence, only whispers.
You're halfway through a pomegranate when the messenger bursts in. He's pale, panting, and holding a twisted bundle of reeds tied with red string. The kind of object that immediately makes you want to burn it, then the floor beneath it, then maybe the entire room just to be safe. "From the oracle at Praeneste," he says, eyes wide. Of course it is. You take the bundle and gently pry it open, trying not to get hex residue on your tunic. Inside is a wax tablet, etched roughly with a message that reads like the fever dream of someone who fell asleep during a thunderstorm. Beware the moon when it hides its face. The lion will roar beneath your table. The goat will not wake. You exhale through your nose, so it's one of those days. Your chamberlain is already hovering at your elbow. "Shall I summon the augurs, sire?" "Yes," you mutter. "And the kitchen. I want to make sure we're not actually keeping a lion under the table." The augurs arrive in their usual cloud of bird feathers and barely concealed smugness. One of them holds a sacrificial chicken. Another wears sandals made from eel leather. They begin inspecting the reeds, then the wax, then, naturally, the orientation of the setting sun versus the angle of your chair. You've sat through this enough times to know how it ends. Vague warnings, more incense, and someone gets a raise. "Signs of celestial imbalance," one murmurs. "Very bad." "You said that last week." He straightens. "Yes, and was it not a bad week?" Fair point. They perform a quick ritual involving olive leaves and murmured prayers to Mercury. You pretend to watch. What you're really doing is trying to decide whether this oracle is referring to your cousin's possible betrayal, a senatorial revolt, or your ongoing digestive issues. Could be any of the above, possibly all three. Historians still argue whether oracles were actually believed by emperors or simply used as convenient excuses for difficult decisions. You've learned to keep them close, less for the truth, more for the political cover. Nothing makes a bad policy more acceptable than saying, "Sorry, Jupiter said no." Your wife arrives, having heard the whispers. Of course she has. She moves like a storm cloud wrapped in silk, eyes narrowing at the ritual in progress. "Let me guess. A goat refused to blink, and now we're all doomed?" she says. "No," you reply. "The goat won't wake this time." She blinks. Better, more dramatic. You hand her the oracle's message. She reads it, then folds it neatly and places it on a nearby tray, like it's a dinner invitation she might accept just to be polite. "I'll have your astrologer come after sunset. He's been charting Mars again. Said it's doing that thing it does before emperors fall off balconies." Great. Another cheerful evening forecast. As she leaves, a servant scurries in with a note. Your cousin Tiberius has requested an audience.
Tomorrow, early, you look back at the oracle's wax tablet. Lion, table, goat. And you wonder, briefly, if Tiberius has recently purchased a pet.
Twilight descends in Rome with that golden softness that makes even political rivals look poetic in silhouette. But the soft glow is just a velvet curtain draped over something sharper. Tonight you dine not alone, not in peace, but at a banquet, a feast where laughter's loudest when knives are closest. You arrive fashionably late, of course. An emperor is never early unless it's war or prophecy. The triclinium is already buzzing. Guests recline on jeweled couches, their togas strategically loosened to suggest comfort and wealth. Incense curls through the air in delicate loops. Perfume, roasted meats, and that distinctive aroma of nervous ambition cling to the walls like ivy. Tonight's host? Senator Faustus, a man with more villas than original thoughts. He greets you with a bow so deep his bald patch catches a candle reflection. Imperator, he says with teeth polished enough to blind small birds. May this humble gathering honor your divinity and leave you only slightly overstuffed. You smile. Only slightly. Anything more would be treason. Polite laughter follows. You recline at the central couch, flanked by your wife on one side, radiating passive aggression in pearls, and a military tribune on the other, who keeps quoting Virgil like it's foreplay. The first course is served, honeyed dormice. Yes, dormice. Stuffed, glazed, and arranged like tiny crunchy emperors. You pretend to enjoy them. No one actually does. Then come spiced sausages, oysters soaked in vinegar, and a suspiciously jiggly aspic that quivers like it knows something you don't. Flavia avoids it. You do too. The conversation flows. Politics, poetry, plagues. Someone jokes about a senator's recent accidental exile. Nervous laughter again, because in this room, accidents happen on purpose. Suddenly, clang. A senator fumbles his dagger into the roast boar. Everyone freezes, then erupts into laughter. Oh, how funny, how harmless. Except the dagger wasn't part of the servingware. You give the senator a long, serene look. He sweats, profusely. Claims it was a gift he forgot to leave at the door. You nod. Call for a slave to retrieve it. The room relaxes. The senator doesn't. You make a mental note. Keep an eye on his wine budget and his friends in the Praetorian Guard. This is what passes for entertainment at your table. Every toast is a test. Every course, a minefield. One guest keeps staring too long at your hands, checking for trimmers, perhaps. Another laughs a little too quickly when you mention last month's failed grain shipment. You smile at them all like you're made of sunshine, while your internal monologue runs full battlefield simulation. Historians still argue whether banquets were displays of power or opportunities for silent warfare. You know the answer. Both. And tonight, someone's trying to gauge your appetite for vulnerability. Dessert arrives, figs stuffed with walnuts and drizzled in honey. You don't touch yours. You never eat figs at banquets anymore, not since that one attempt involving pine resin and powdered glass. Still, you compliment them. The host glows. The guests sigh of relief. You raise your cup. To Rome, you say, voice smooth as silk. Everyone drinks. You don't.
The banquet winds down at a snail's pace. There's always one senator who insists on reciting poetry, and tonight, that senator is Publius Lentulus, a man whose voice sounds like wet bread being chewed slowly. He drones on about love, fate, and the tragic beauty of swans. You sit there nodding, one elbow propped on a velvet cushion, wondering if death by verse is officially listed in the imperial handbook. Eventually, mercifully, it ends. You retreat through the halls in silence, each torch you pass casting tall, flickering shadows on the stone walls. They sway like ghosts trying to follow you home. You reach your personal quarters and dismiss the servants with a look. You're too tired for more whispering, too weary for more bowing. The guards post themselves at the door. Statues in armor, supposedly loyal. You think 2 of them swapped shifts recently, but can't remember why. The moment you're alone, you let out the day's 5th sigh, deep and slow, like a collapsing tent. You remove the laurel wreath, your temples still tender from its weight. You change into a linen tunic, less symbolic and infinitely more breathable. And finally, you settle onto your sleeping couch. Not a bed, a couch. Because somewhere along the line, you forgot how to lie down like a normal human being. A slave tiptoes in to light the oil lamp and then vanishes like a well-trained shadow. The soft flicker is meant to comfort you. It doesn't. You try to rest. You do. You close your eyes and think about clouds or olive groves or that one summer in Capri where you weren't emperor yet and your biggest worry was whether your sandals matched your tunic. But the silence is too loud. There's a rustle near the window, then a scraping sound, soft, almost polite. Could be a rat, could be something worse. Your hand slips instinctively under the pillow where a slim dagger waits. It's not paranoia, it's protocol. You don't move. You listen. Nothing. Except maybe footsteps? Or just floorboards adjusting. You don't know. You never know. Not anymore. Historians still argue whether emperors lived in constant fear or simply grew numb to it. You think the answer is more subtle. Eventually, fear becomes routine, like dressing, or bathing, or signing the life or death of someone you'll never meet. You finally drift into something that resembles sleep, but it's not restful. It's the kind of half-sleep where your mind floats, twitching on the edge of every whisper. You dream you're still signing decrees, only this time the scrolls never end. They stretch past the horizon, and every name you sign is someone who wants something from you. And in the dream, your ink is blood. You wake with a start. There's a light knocking at the door. Not urgent, just insistent. A messenger, of course. You sit up slowly, pressing your fingers to your eyelids. The city sleeps, but the empire does not. And you barely remember how.
The knock that roused you turns out to be your Praetorian prefect. Of all the men who swear they'd die for you, he's the one you most expect to do the killing. His armor gleams despite the hour, which is either discipline or a subtle threat. You don't ask which. "Apologies, Imperator," he says, bowing just enough to be polite. "But there was a situation in the barracks." You motion for him to continue, rubbing sleep from your eyes like a man who hasn't truly slept since the last comet. A pair of new recruits were found sparring after hours. Nothing unusual, except they weren't sparring with practice swords. He lets the silence hang. You fill in the rest. Real weapons. Unauthorized. Probably sharpened. Probably pointed at effigies that looked eerily like you. I trust they've been encouraged to find other careers? You ask dryly. One fell. The other confessed he was testing reaction times. You snort. And what was the reaction? He lost 3 teeth. You nod. Then the system works. But you don't miss the undertone in the prefect's voice. It's the kind of tone that says, there are whispers, and they're getting louder. You dismiss him with a wave, and he bows again, this time a fraction lower. Not respect, calculation. When he leaves, you remain seated, staring at the darkened wall where moonlight casts the shadow of your bust. It looks heroic, steady, a bold chin you didn't earn. But here's the thing no one tells you about power. The higher you rise, the fewer people you can trust to carry your weight without trying to drop you. The Praetorian Guard is supposed to be your shield, but they've also killed more emperors than plague, poison, and poorly built balconies combined. The numbers don't lie. You just politely ignore them. Historians still argue whether the Praetorians were protectors of the state or kingmakers with very sharp knives and flexible morals. You suspect the truth is worse. They're both, depending on the hour and the bribe. Your thoughts drift to your predecessors. Caligula, murdered by his own guards. Galba, cut down in the Forum by men who'd cheered him days before. Even Commodus, strangled in his own bath by a wrestler. No one ever dies quietly in this job. No one ever retires peacefully to a farm. There's a tap at your window. Not a knock, just a soft clink. You stiffen. A shadow moves in the garden. You draw your curtain aside just enough to peer through the glass. A figure darts behind a column, too fast to identify. Guard? Assassin? Curious servant chasing a stray cat? You'll never know. You could call for someone, but that would mean admitting you're afraid. Instead, you sit down again. You press your hand to your chest as if you could physically hold your heart in place. Calm it with imperial dignity. You pour a small cup of wine. Just a sip. Just enough to remind yourself you're still in control, even if it's a fragile illusion wrapped in ceremonial gold. The night deepens. You watch the shadows move across the marble. You're safe. For now.
Just after dawn, your breakfast is interrupted by your mother. Because, of course it is. You don't hear her enter. You feel it. The subtle hush of the chamberlain's terror. The sudden scurrying of servants folding linens that were already folded. The slight shift in the air as if even the laurel crown on your bust decided to sit up straighter. She glides in like a ship made of lace and warnings. Her jewelry jingles just enough to imply menace. Her hair is perfect. Her sandals are quiet. Her intentions are not. "My sweet," she says, in the tone one might use to address a slightly disappointing oracle, "we need to talk about your astrologer." Of course you do. You take a bite of a fig, cautiously, as always, and gesture for her to sit. She doesn't. She prefers to hover like a politically astute vulture. "He told me Mars is in retrograde. Again. I find that very unsettling." You chew, swallow, sip your wine. "Astrological events tend to repeat, Mother. That's how astronomy works." She waves this off like it's an annoying fly. "No, darling, what's unsettling is him. He mumbles. He smells like burnt almonds. And last week he said my third house was compromised. What even is a third house?" "Something about communication," you murmur, hoping to end this line of thought before it becomes a referendum on your spiritual cabinet. She leans in now. "I think we should replace him." You blink. "With whom?" She says smoothly, "I have someone in mind. A brilliant young man from Alexandria, reads dreams, knows herbs, said my aura was imperial lavender." Lavender's a flower. Yes, and a destiny. You breathe deeply. That makes 7 sighs today. Or is it 8? You're losing count. Your mother has always been like this, all silk and steel. She suggests things, but the weight behind her suggestions could sink a trireme. When you were 8, she suggested you stop favoring your left hand. You haven't used it for writing since. Historians still argue whether imperial mothers held actual political power or simply operated behind the scenes with whisper campaigns and strategic matchmaking. In your case, the answer is simple. She does both, simultaneously, with perfect posture. She continues, "Also, I heard your Praetorian prefect is getting too comfortable." "I trust him," you reply, lying smoothly. She smiles in that way mothers do when they know you're either doomed or lying, possibly both. She says, "He reminds me of your father," and you know how that ended. You do. Everyone does. Your father's mysterious accident involved a ladder, a lantern, and an unfortunately timed prophecy. You try to redirect. "Have you spoken with the Vestals lately?" She narrows her eyes. "Don't change the subject." You smile politely. Too late. She gives you one last long look. Think about the astrologer, and the prefect, and maybe wear more red. It commands respect. She turns and leaves with imperial flair, her silks trailing a scent of lilies and veiled threats. You stare into your wine cup, swirling it slowly. You wonder, not for the first time, if it's your crown that keeps you upright, or just your mother's willpower.
You retreat, finally, to the rooftop garden. The sun is soft, not yet the scorcher it becomes by noon, and the air carries a hint of citrus from the potted trees lining the edge. It's your favorite place in the palace, high above the noise, the petitions, the feasts, and yes, even your mother. A servant lingers nearby with a tray of watered wine and figs, but you wave him away. You need no audience for what's coming, not this time. You sit on a bench carved with mythic scenes, gods doing glorious, impossible things, none of which involved tax codes or grain shipments. From here, the city stretches out beneath you like a mosaic. Clay rooftops, wisps of smoke, the glint of marble, the blur of humanity in constant motion. And for a moment, you let yourself go still. Your thoughts drift to what-ifs. What if you hadn't accepted the purple? What if you'd stayed in the provinces? What if you were a farmer, or a teacher, or one of those lucky fools who gets to grow old anonymously with bad knees and good wine? Historians still argue whether emperors ever truly doubted their role, or if such reflections are later inventions meant to soften the hard truths of absolute power. You could settle that debate yourself, because here you are, robe loose, crown resting on your lap, wondering whether ruling the world is a divine calling or just a very elaborate trap set by history. You remember your father's face when they told him he'd been chosen. He didn't smile. He looked like someone had just handed him a sword and asked him to hug it. You understand that look now. A bee buzzes past your head, looping lazily before disappearing into a lemon blossom. For a ridiculous second, you envy it. The bee has a job. It does its job. It's not expected to bless aqueducts or interpret goat omens or navigate dagger-infested banquets. A gentle breeze nudges a curl of hair into your eyes. You brush it aside and lean back, staring at the sky. So calm, so empty, so completely unaware of the mess beneath it. You remember a time before the crown, back when you were still allowed to laugh too loud or lose a game or say something foolish without it becoming state policy. Now, your laughter is measured. Your defeats are private. Your every word a decree, no matter how accidental. Flavia once asked if you missed being unknown. You told her no. You lied. From down below, you hear music. Faint, probably from the Subura. A flute, a drum, and someone clapping out of time. Ordinary life, untouched by laurel wreaths and whispered conspiracies. You sit there longer than you should, just letting your mind wander. Dangerous, really.
because it always wanders in the same direction. Away. Away from the marble, away from the gold, away from the eyes. You close your eyes and imagine what it might feel like to just walk. No guards, no titles, no shadow following every step. Just a man, maybe a little tired, headed nowhere in particular. You open your eyes again, and you're still here. Still Emperor.
You return to your private chamber just before sunset, thinking maybe you'll get an hour without interruptions, when your chief of household staff appears, pale and pinching the bridge of his nose like a man wrestling the gods themselves.
There's something you should see, sire.
Of course there is. You follow him down a narrow corridor that smells like dust and old sandals toward the palace garden. At first, you expect a dead bird or maybe another love poem carved into a column. That happened last month. Very dramatic, not very well written. But what he shows you is worse, more specific. Near your favorite olive tree, yes, the one you like to lean against when pretending to enjoy poetry readings, a lead curse tablet has been hammered into the earth. Thin, gray, roughly the size of your palm, and humming with ill intentions. You crouch to read it. The letters are jagged, written in haste. May the emperor's feet blister, his tongue swell, and his seed dry to ash. May his eyes darken, and his name be forgotten. To be fair, not your worst review. You rise slowly, brushing the dust from your tunic, and say, "Who found it?" The steward replies, "He wept." Out of fear or joy? He wouldn't say. You nod. Reasonable. The tablet is carefully retrieved by a priest from the Temple of Mercury. He arrives wrapped in talismans and armed with an entire pouch of purifying herbs. He tuts a lot. Says the handwriting is amateur, but the curse has teeth. Apparently, it includes a component invoking Mania, the goddess of the dead, and a rare fish oil smear meant to symbolically rot your tongue. How creative, you murmur, deadpan. He recommends a cleansing ritual involving smoke, wine, and goat blood. You agree to the wine part and make a note to maybe skip figs again for a while, just in case. Historians still argue whether cursed tablets were taken seriously by the imperial household or simply treated as superstitious graffiti. But when you've had one slipped under your bath mat and another buried in a bouquet last Saturnalia, you begin to think someone out there really, truly hates your toes. Back in your chamber, your astrologer arrives uninvited, as always, smelling faintly of cinnamon and panic. He insists the curse corresponds with a celestial misalignment, Venus conjunct Pluto, or something equally unsettling, and warns that unless you wear amulets on both ankles, your fate may become soggy. You thank him, politely, while actively wondering if throwing him into the Tiber would also misalign something, preferably his spine. Later, alone again, you examine your feet. They look fine. For now. But it's not the blisters that worry you. It's the name. May his name be forgotten. That's the real wound, isn't it? For a Roman emperor, death is inevitable. But erasure? Oblivion? You'd rather be cursed by fish guts than forgotten by history. So you do what all emperors must do when faced with hate carved in lead and sprinkled with spite. You order the olive tree replanted. You have the soil blessed, and then you commission a statue of yourself, taller than the last, to be placed near it. Let them curse. You'll outlast them. Or at least, you'll look good doing it.
You've never trusted the Praetorian Guard, which is awkward, considering they're the ones meant to keep you alive, in theory. In practice, they're the most polite group of heavily armed gamblers you've ever met, smiling as they open doors, nodding as they silently calculate how many other emperors they could install with the right purse and timing. You walk the barracks today, not out of affection, out of necessity.
The guards need to see you, smell your presence, be reminded that you still breathe, still command, and still know exactly who's been slipping off duty to visit certain senators late at night. The barracks are clean but tense, like a cat ready to bolt. Rows of glinting armor hang neatly along the walls. Shields line up like a chorus line of judgment. The men are training in the yard, synchronized, sharp, and just the tiniest bit too theatrical. You nod at a few of them. Most bow. One, young, twitchy, always chewing something, avoids your gaze just a second too long. Your prefect meets you mid-courtyard, flanked by lieutenants who look like carved from marble and bad decisions. His armor is pristine, and his tone is casual. "Imperator," he says. "A surprise visit. I find surprises clarifying." He smiles, as do we. The walkthrough continues. They show you new weapons. Improved spears, they say. Better iron. They also mention a newly refurbished watchtower, funded by donations from an anonymous senator who just happens to have 4 sons of military age. You pretend to be impressed. Then the prefect gestures to the new recruits. "The future of your protection," he says, sweeping a hand over a row of wiry young men who look like they still sleep with slings under their pillows. "Fine bones," you murmur. He chuckles. "We test them thoroughly." "I should hope so." He doesn't flinch, but something in his eyes sharpens just a little. Historians still argue whether the Praetorians were a stabilizing force or a sword constantly held to the emperor's throat. You've never once felt stabilized. Every time they bow, you count the seconds it takes them to stand up. Too slow? Too fast? Each nuance is a threat, cloaked in discipline. Last year, one of your personal guards tripped during a ceremony. Just a stumble, a sandal lace. But for a heartbeat, every person in that room imagined what would happen if he hadn't missed. You did too. It stuck with you, like a grain of sand in your boot. You pause at the armory. Inside, everything gleams, cleaned hourly, sharpened daily, polished until your reflection returns a gaze you don't quite recognize. A sword rests on the central table, ornate, unused, ceremonial. You pick it up. It's heavy, balanced, the kind meant for cutting symbols into flesh, not fighting. You hand it back. The prefect takes it with both hands, respectfully. "You have excellent taste in weapons," he says. "I hope I never need to use one." He bows. You walk away, heart steady, mind racing. Because here's the thing. They fear you for now, but fear fades. And loyalty? Loyalty is just a contract waiting for better terms.
Succession. It's the word you never say out loud, but it hums through the palace like a draft through old columns, inevitable, chilling, and ready to knock something over when you least expect it. You're in your study now, surrounded by scrolls, busts of ancestors glaring from their pedestals, and one extremely anxious advisor who keeps clearing his throat like he's trying to summon a new air by sheer coughing. "Sire," he says gently, "the matter of inheritance remains delicate. Delicate. As if choosing the next ruler of the known world is on par with trimming a bonsai." You wave him off. Yes, delicate. Also fatal, historically. Because here's the problem. Succession in Rome isn't about merit. It's about optics, alliances, bribes, and how many legions would actually show up if things went sideways, which they absolutely will. Your options?
A cousin who writes mediocre poetry and once attempted to seduce your wife, a general who's loved by the army but has the personality of a particularly aggressive loaf of bread, and a teenage nephew who keeps feeding coins to statues and asking when the moon will speak back. You're spoiled for choice. You unroll a scroll, draft number 15 of your imperial will, also known as the document most likely to get me stabbed. The language is carefully vague, no promises, no names, just hints, like a riddle with a fatal punchline. Shall we finalize it? Your advisor asks. You stare at the wax tablet used for drafts. There's already a faint outline where you wrote and erased the same name 3 times. No, you reply. Not yet. Historians still argue whether Roman emperors truly intended their successors to rule or merely set the stage for power struggles they wouldn't live to see. You wonder if it even matters. Half the time, the designated heir is dead before the ink dries. You tried adoption once. That boy died of natural causes in his sleep at 14. Nothing's more natural in Rome than a pillow pressed at midnight by an ambitious cousin. You tried promoting capable men, offering honors to those who didn't ask for them. Most refused. The smart ones ran. The brave ones died. The foolish ones smiled too widely and started writing their names in capital letters on temple stones. You walk to the window and look out over the city. Your city, for now. What about the Senate? Your advisor asks. I scoff. They'd nominate a horse if it brought them enough grain, which, technically, has almost happened. Still, you know this is a loose thread you can't ignore forever. Someone must hold the reins after you, unless, of course, they end up garroted with them instead. A breeze stirs the curtains. For a second, the sound is almost soothing. You imagine walking away, disappearing, leaving no successor, letting the empire unravel like a poorly knotted sandal. But then the image fades. You return to your desk. You pick up your stylus. You write one name, then cross it out again. Because planning for the future, in your position, is just a quieter way of tempting fate. You're back in the Hall of Ancestors, a long corridor flanked by marble busts of emperors past, noble brows, stern jaws, hollow eyes. They say nothing. They judge everything. It's quiet here, not silent. The walls have their own kind of whisper. Your sandals scuff against polished stone, and somewhere overhead, a pigeon coos like it's reading the names of your forebears aloud. You pause before the likeness of Julius Caesar. His face is calm, confident, etched with the smug permanence of legacy. He wasn't officially emperor, of course, just a dictator, just a man who pushed too far, too fast, and found himself surrounded by daggers. You wonder if he ever regretted crossing the Rubicon, if he felt the cold bloom of betrayal before the knives hit flesh. Next is Augustus, the great consolidator, the chess master. He knew how to smile while strangling a rebellion with silk. You studied him as a boy, tried to copy his composure, failed miserably. Then there's Caligula, the mad one, or so they say. Historians still argue whether he was truly insane or simply too honest about the cruelty of power. You suspect it's both. Anyone who made a horse a priest was either brilliant or bored, or brilliantly bored. You keep walking. Nero with his haunted eyes and infamously musical talents. Tiberius, who ruled from a cliff and let others bleed in his name. Domitian, stabbed in the stomach by people who had dinner with him the night before. You pass them all all men who once wore your title, all dead. Some hated, some beloved, most forgotten by anyone who makes statues for a living. You sit on the cold bench at the end of the hall and let the weight of their stories press against your shoulders like a toga soaked in regret. These men, these emperors, they all thought they'd endure, not just their buildings or their coins or their decrees, them. But memory is fickle. One bad harvest and they curse your name. One lost battle and they chip your statue into gravel. You wonder, not for the first time, if the people will remember you for what you did or for how you died. You think about the curse tablet from earlier, the dream-haunting note left in your garden, the strange sounds in the hall last night, the moment during breakfast when your wine tasted just a little sweet. Maybe you're imagining things, or maybe you finally inherited the same creeping dread that hollowed out the eyes of every bust in this room. You reach out and touch the stone shoulder of Marcus Aurelius, philosopher-emperor, stoic champion of inner peace and logic. His marble is worn smooth by the same anxious touch of every ruler who stood here before. You whisper, "Any advice?" He says nothing. Of course he doesn't. You rise. You walk back the way you came. Every step feels heavier. Not from fear, but from knowing that even if you survive tomorrow, history still might forget you. And the marble? The marble never answers back.
The palace messenger approaches mid-afternoon, eyes wide, tunic stained with dust from the Appian Way. He bows, mouth twitching somewhere between fear and confusion. "Envoys, sire, from Germania. You nearly dropped the stylus you were using to annotate yet another supply report. Germania? Now? It's like receiving a birthday card from someone who's spent years throwing rocks at your window." You make your way to the reception chamber, a place designed to intimidate, not welcome. Tall ceilings, cold marble, statues of victorious Roman generals glaring from pedestals. The room smells faintly of incense and overconfidence. They enter, flanked by guards who are both curious and bored. Two envoys. One wears a wolfskin cloak. The other carries a carved staff topped with a boar's tusk. Both are tall, long-haired, and looking around the palace like they're mentally measuring it for firewood. "Imperator," the first says, in surprisingly crisp Latin, "we come with peace," which, historically speaking, is usually followed by either a request for wine or a demand for hostages. You nod for them to continue. They explain that one of their tribes is experiencing a strange illness, fevers, weakness, dreams of fire and snow. Their shamans are confused, which, judging by their facial expressions, is quite rare. And so, brace yourself, they would like to borrow your personal physician. You don't laugh. You want to, but you don't. Instead, you lean forward slowly and ask, "The one who sold my hair as talismans, or the one who swears he cured a senator's baldness using frog tongues?" They hesitate. "The better one?" Your prefect clears his throat. "We can spare a physician, but perhaps not that one." The envoys also bring gifts, which is both touching and mildly alarming. Gift 1, a box of mushrooms, glowing slightly. You gently slide that to the side. Gift 2, a carved wooden idol that, according to them, wards off betrayal. It looks like a turnip with teeth. Gift 3, a letter written in what appears to be blood. It's ceremonial, they assure you. Of course it is. Historians still argue whether these kinds of diplomatic visits ever truly meant peace or if they were just reconnaissance missions wrapped in politeness. You suspect these envoys are here partly for help,
partly for theater, and partly to sniff around your palace like wolves checking a fence for weak spots. Still, rejecting them outright would be worse. So you smile, gracious and unreadable, and agree to send a physician, under guard, with scrolls, and strict instructions not to accept any stew. They seem pleased. One of them even grins, which reveals a tooth made of bronze. You're not sure if that's fashion or accident. As they prepare to leave, the taller envoy leans in and says softly, "Our seer saw fire on your roof. Soon." You blink. Was that a vision or a threat? He smiles. Both. Maybe neither. They exit. You stand there in the echoing chamber, trying to decide whether diplomacy ever actually feels like a good idea, or if it's just slow-motion war served with better wine. You look down at the mushroom box. It's still glowing.
You should be feeling triumphant. Today, your image has officially been struck onto the new imperial coinage, fresh from the mint, hot as a forge's breath and glistening with finely chiseled cheekbones. The engraver insisted the nose came out heroic. You didn't argue. You know how dangerous it is to offend someone wielding both artistic pride and molten metal. The new coin is a denarius, bearing your profile on one side, chin slightly elevated because divinity doesn't slouch, and a radiant sunburst behind your head. The other side? A she-wolf cradling Rome's twin founders. Classic. Safe. Slightly condescending. You examine one closely. It still smells of ash and ambition. Distribute them immediately, you tell your treasurer. Let every hand in Rome feel my face. He nods, reverently, as though you just proclaimed a new dawn instead of mass-producing shiny reminders of your power. Coins are clever tools, more than money. They're propaganda you can stack, spend, and slip into togas during speeches. Even a starving man feels momentarily respected when your face buys him bread. You flip one between your fingers. It spins neatly, then lands with a sharp clink, your nose pointing skyward. Then the priest bursts in, which, as you've come to learn, is never a good sign. "Sire," he pants, nearly colliding with a bust of Mars. "A comet was seen last night, just past the Palatine Hill." You blink. And it moved backward. Backward? Yes, which is traditionally interpreted as complicated. Of course it is. You summon your astrologer, the good one this time, the one who smells like figs and carries 6 scrolls everywhere like he's married to them. He confirms the sighting, not just a comet, a reversal of celestial favor. Perhaps, he adds delicately, you've drawn attention to yourself prematurely. You hold up the coin. This? He shrugs. The gods may be subtle, but they're not that subtle. Historians still argue whether celestial events were actually read as omens, or if the elite simply used them as excuses to change plans without admitting weakness. You'd prefer to believe in weather, not fate. But then again, last time a comet showed up, your uncle lost 3 provinces and an eyebrow. The palace is buzzing with quiet fear by sundown. The coin release continues, of course. There's no stopping it now. But there's a new tension in the air, like a harp string pulled too tight. You try to laugh it off during dinner. You make a joke about the gods being jealous of your likeness. A few people chuckle. One noble chokes on a grape. You spend the evening pacing your study, tossing a coin in the air and watching how it falls. Heads. 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 Then, tails. You freeze. The she-wolf's snarl looks a little too smug tonight. You set the coin down and blow out the lamp. If the gods are watching, let them. But you're starting to wonder if it was really the mint that struck your likeness, or fate, sharpening its blade. You wake to drums. Not metaphorical ones, the real kind. Low, slow, and echoing from the Aventine Hill, which can only mean one thing. Moon Festival. Of course, how could you forget? It's that one night a year when the city stays up too late, sacrifices get weird, and somebody always eats the wrong thing and sees the goddess Luna riding a flaming goose across the sky. Your attendants help you into ceremonial robes dyed in midnight blue, with silver-threaded embroidery that's supposed to evoke the soft radiance of moonlight. You feel less radiant and more like a very tired blueberry. Down in the forum, the celebration is already in full swing. Musicians play flutes and drums, dancers twirl in veils, and acrobats tumble past braziers burning lavender and some other scent you can't quite place, possibly burnt goak. The moon hangs low and full, watching the whole thing like it's seen worse. You sit on a raised platform draped in white silk. The crowd cheers. You wave. A child throws a handful of flower petals at your face. You nod serenely while discreetly blinking one out of your left eye. Then comes the food. It starts harmless enough. Honey cakes shaped like crescent moons, little cheese rounds dyed pale blue, a roasted boar with fennel and, wait, glowing mushrooms? Your steward hesitates as he lifts the cloche on a platter labeled simply Night Beast. You arch an eyebrow. He leans in. It's symbolic. You lean back. It's moving. Only slightly, sire. You pass. Just as well. Last year, the governor of Pannonia claimed to see his dead grandmother in the soup steam, spent 3 months speaking in riddles, and was eventually reassigned to lighthouse duty. The dancers shift into a slower rhythm. The air thickens, and then the ritual begins. A priestess steps forward with a silver bowl filled with dark liquid. Wine, herbs, something pungent. She offers it to you. For vision, she says. You sip. Bad idea. The sky tilts. The stars hum. The forum pulses. You blink, and for one surreal moment, the marble columns sway like trees, and the statue of Luna opens her stone eyes and winks. You're not hallucinating. Probably. But maybe? It's hard to say. Someone nearby is whispering about prophecies, and a man in a deer mask is weeping with joy. Should I be concerned? You murmur to your wife? She doesn't answer. She's feeding grapes to a swan. Historians still argue whether moon festivals were religious events or just thinly veiled excuses for mass hallucination. You're leaning toward both, especially since one senator is now embracing a tree and calling it his father. You regain your composure just in time for the final blessing. You rise, arms outstretched, and declare the moon's guidance upon the empire. Everyone cheers, mostly because the wine was free and someone just loosed a dozen doves into the crowd. It's chaos. It's beautiful. Back in your chamber, hours later, you collapse into your couch, clothes reeking of incense and sweet herbs. You stare at the moon through your window. Still full, still silent. And you wonder, briefly, if it really was watching tonight, and what, exactly, it saw.
You wake with a headache and the lingering taste of last night's vision wine coating the back of your throat like burnt licorice. There's a faint feather stuck to your sleeve. You pluck it off and toss it aside, trying not to think about the senator who tried to marry a dove mid-festival. Rome has layers. Just as you begin to rise, your chamberlain enters, looking slightly paler than usual, which is saying something for a man whose wardrobe consists of muted beige and existential dread. He bows, sweating. Sire, there was an incident. Of course there was. He explains quickly. A palace servant was found unconscious outside the Empress' private garden. Nearby, an exotic bird, believed to be a trained parrot, was discovered dead. The cause? Poison. Possibly meant for someone higher on the food chain, namely you. Your first question, why was a parrot in the garden? Your second, who poisons a parrot? Apparently, the parrot had been taught to repeat phrases, sweet nothings, flattering titles, rumors about troop movements in Gaul, that sort of thing. A gift from a senator's niece, very charming, very dead now. And the servant, you ask? He alive, but babbling. Something about hairpins and mime troops. Ah, the plot thickens, unnecessarily. You pull on a robe and summon your spymaster. He arrives within minutes, holding a small sealed scroll and a facial expression that suggests he hasn't slept since Saturnalia. He reads aloud. Zaya, an anonymous note delivered at dawn. It reads, "The rose wilts where the shadow lengthens. Beware the mime, the mistress, and the man with the limp." You blink. Sounds like a rejected play. He nods gravely. Or a very poetic hit list. There's movement in the corner. A palace mime. Yes, you have one, don't ask. Stands completely still, face painted white, holding a bouquet that wasn't there an hour ago. You make a mental note to reassign him to a posting that doesn't involve existence. Historians still argue whether the sheer volume of imperial assassination plots was exaggerated by paranoid record keepers, or if every week really did include at least one poisoned robe, cursed mirror, or acrobatic betrayal involving rope swings and wedding guests. You suspect the latter. You decide to investigate further, quietly. Your wife denies involvement, naturally, though she does raise one perfect eyebrow when you mention the parrot. He repeated gossip. That's how parrots die in Rome. You can't argue with that. The mime is interrogated through interpretive gesture. It's wildly unhelpful, but oddly moving. He mimes drinking, falling over, and then climbing an invisible ladder. The guards give up halfway through. You reward him with 3 dates and a firm suggestion that he take a vacation in Hispania. By evening, it's still unclear who the parrot was working for or against. The servant is recovering. The poisoned hairpin, as it turns out, belonged to one of your wife's attendants. She insists it was meant for her own bun, not yours. Right. You dine alone, just in case. Tonight, your food taster eats everything first, even the olives, especially the olives. The halls are quieter than usual, except for a new scratching noise behind your wall. Not a rant, too deliberate. You place the dead parrot's cage outside your door, a symbol, a warning, or maybe just a question. If the bird wasn't the message, what was?
The night is clear, too clear. The stars glitter above Rome like tiny, judgmental eyes. You stand on your balcony, wrapped in a thin wool cloak, the chill clinging just enough to keep you aware of your skin, your breath, your pulse. Below, the city murmurs in its sleep. Dogs bark faintly in the alleys. A lute strums somewhere far off, and the Tiber glints like spilled oil under moonlight. You lean on the balustrade, staring out at the domes and rooftops, at the shadows curling around temples and courtyards. Somewhere down there, someone is whispering your name, praise, curses, fantasies of revolution, all in one breath. Your body is still, but your mind doesn't rest. The parrot, the poison, the scratching in the walls, the guards with too perfect posture, the cousin who wants an audience, the moon that moved backwards. You rub your temple slowly. The laurel wreath sits untouched beside you, its gold catching the torchlight like a promise it can't keep. Behind you, the palace is dark. The great corridors, the painted ceilings, the endless marble, all asleep or pretending to be. Even your wife has retired early, a rare gift, or a warning.
Historians still argue whether emperors died more from betrayal or boredom. You suspect it's the same thing in the end, just different speeds. You think about legacy again, that ghost you carry around your neck like a medallion. Will you be remembered? Will the people chant your name when grain arrives on time? Will they build statues of you that birds refuse to poop on? Or will you become one more marble bust in a long hallway, admired only for symmetry and historically accurate nose curvature? You glance up at the stars. A shooting one darts across the sky. A sign? Or just a rock with ambition? You close your eyes and breathe in, and then for a moment, just a moment, you let go of the day, of the throne, of the noise. You sit on the cold stone bench just inside your chamber, unlacing your sandals like any tired Roman, the weight of your title folded quietly with your robe. The room is silent now. The night presses in gently. Maybe tomorrow they'll name a plaza after you, or maybe they'll rename your favorite fountain after the general who outlived you. Maybe your death will be dramatic, or absurd, or God's willing, uneventful. But not tonight. Tonight, the stars are just stars. And you're still breathing, still here, still Emperor.
The torches fade one by one in the hallways. Footsteps retreat, slow and deliberate. A final door creaks shut. The whisper of aged hinges sealing the night. You rest your head back, eyes half-lidded now. The weight of the crown finally set aside for good. The shadows stretch long and quiet across the chamber floor, softening into the corners, like sleep itself creeping in through stone and silence. There's a distant echo of voices, faint, filtered by walls and time. Perhaps guards muttering at their post, or a servant humming to herself in the kitchens, or just memory, drifting in on the cool breath of night. The stone beneath your feet has cooled. The fabric over your shoulders feels just heavy enough to remind you you're not floating, but not so heavy you can't pretend. The Empire sleeps, and in this rare stillness, there is no parchment to sign, no threats to decode, no games to play, just the faint scent of old incense in the air, the hush of wind through columns, and the rhythm of your breath, slowing, deepening. You've made it through another day. Maybe not unscathed, but unbroken. You are not marble tonight, not coin, not command. You are simply a man in a room watching the moon sink lower across the rooftops, wondering what the morning will bring, and knowing it doesn't matter yet. You're safe, you're home, you're asleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.